Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and this is going to be our follow-up video to the Tumbril Ranger, which is going to be your motorcycle bike now that we have the Q&A post out. First things first, apologies, I know this came out about 5 days ago, but life has been busy, so this is my first time getting around to doing this. So, the real question here has been the same one that I've been wondering about for a while now, and that's the why a ground-locked bike over a hover bike, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the answer was one of the ones that I speculated about, and being that the fact that you do have a lower signature because you have fewer thrusters and less reliance on the Gravlev technology to be able to keep yourself off the ground. Now, there was a follow-up standalone question that basically asked the same thing, which they answered and said that the Ranger is going to have a lower signature than the Dragonfly, the Nox, and the X1. So if being unseen is the most important thing, then the ground bike is going to be probably your best bet. Now, aside from signature, though, you do have a smaller and more compact frame, which means that you're going to be able to fit this ship or this vehicle in more ships, which is pretty helpful. And they also said that in the future there's going to be environmental factors that prohibit ships and hover tech from being able to enter certain areas, and you're going to be able to get in there with this ship. Now, I haven't personally seen anything yet, and even though it's been talked about for a really long time, actually I think 3 years ago, the CitizenCon demo, the one with the sandworm, actually forced a landing into a particular area where somebody got into an Ursa and then drove to another location. So I think that's what they're kind of envisioning. Now, whether that actually comes to fruition, I don't know. It's been a long time since we've actually visited that, so we'll see, but theoretically that's in place. Now, we mentioned that this is a smaller and more compact vehicle, so that naturally is going to make you ask, what can this fit in? And that was one of the questions that was presented. Basically, anything with a cargo bay can probably fit this. That includes the Argo MPUV. Now, the rule to follow is if it can fit a Grey Cat, it can fit the buggy, so we'll have to see. There's probably some height configurations that we have to consider, but for the most part, I would say if it can fit a Grey Cat, you're safe to go. But it is going to be a very small vehicle, so for some of the other ones that are going to be limited, like if you have a Cyclone, for example, this may be an alternative, so you do have a ground vehicle that can do something. One of the most popular questions that we actually got was a funny one, and I think it was probably to be expected. It was something I called out in our initial video, was what does this cargo vest actually do? Is it actually functional? Can you carry more stuff? And the answer was yeah, eventually yes. You will be able to outfit more stuff on your character. But what it will carry, we don't really know. Are you going to be able to carry a box? Are you going to be able to carry more weapons? Are you going to be able to carry more grenades and ammo and all that kind of stuff? It's just going to be really dependent on how that develops over time. So that's going to be something we need to see. But yes, the idea is you can carry more stuff. But what is that stuff? We don't really know. Now, as far as whether you can do wheelies, which was a highly asked question, the answer is yes. That's the short answer. Now, as far as the real answer is, it's an entirely new driving mechanic. Because you're going to have to avoid this being a two-wheeled quad. You don't want it to perform like a Cyclone, but be a two-wheel vehicle. So it's a new driving model that we need to really see them develop. They want it to perform like a real bike. So I read this as, yes, it will be able to do wheelies, but maybe not intentionally. Like maybe you're not going to hit the acceleration really hard and it's going to end up popping up, or maybe you can only do it on the racer version of this, but it may be something that happens kind of as an accident and you're able to kind of maintain it, or you're able to hit the right type of terrain and then you can decide to maintain it whether you want to, depending on your speed or brake or however you treat that movement. I also read this, though, as this vehicle is going to take longer to be in development because this is a new development approach to a kind of a flight model. So I think this is going to have to fit into the overall development cycle, whereas like when they release a new ship that they want to fast track, if it's following the same flight model all the other ships are taking, it gets out a little bit faster. So I don't expect to see this one out as quickly as we see some of the others. Now, one of the most surprising things was when we were reviewing the cargo variant. It was 1.2 SCU as far as cargo is concerned, which is more than the Cyclone at 1 SCU. And they went on to say that 1.2 was incorrect. They got to stop doing that, by the way, because they're really overselling vehicles, and I think it's causing some tension in the community. But that's a side note and just kind of my personal opinion there. It was a late decision that they say was to increase the power plant size over cargo carrying ability, which means that they ended up having to drop the overall cargo ability, but they didn't change the promotional material to really reflect that. So the cargo capacity is officially now 3 mission boxes, which is way, way less than we had before. I think it ends up being like 0.3 or 0.5 or something like that as far as the SCU is concerned. So it is significantly less, but it does make more sense when you compare it to the Dragonfly, which can carry about half an SCU. So this does make me continue to question the value of the Rangers in general, because in my mind it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a wheeled vehicle, especially when signatures are already kind of not that big of a deal as far as gameplay is concerned. Now you're talking about even less cargo ability and the fact that you're stuck on the ground. I don't see a lot of value here, but we'll go ahead and continue. Can you fire your personal weapon while you're driving? Basically you're driving your bike and you're sticking your arm out holding a pistol and shooting it. The answer is it's to be determined, because they're going to need to get through the Dragonfly and the passenger ability to fire that technology, as well as if you think about being a passenger in a Cyclone, for example, you should have the ability to shoot a gun. So they need to get through that sort of development of that gameplay. It is worth noting, though, that the Dragonfly is a backseat design, which means you're not controlling anything. You're just sitting there. So it's basically an ability you're kind of like a turret in that scenario. When you're talking about being the singular person that's driving a motorcycle and being able to fire at the same time, it's a lot more complicated. And are they going to say that you're going to be able to control this bike with one hand? Or is it going to impact the ability to control the bike while you're actually shooting? Maybe you get limited control while you're in that frame. There's a lot they need to work through there from just a fundamental gameplay perspective, so it's hard for them to really answer, which is why they give a TBD, and I understand that answer. One of the questions was, if this bike gets upside down, can you ride it? I.e., can you get it upright? There's going to be interactions that are going to allow you to flip it. So basically, when you flip one of your if you flip a Dragonfly or a Nox, it kind of uprights itself on its own. That type of animation is going to mirror it, except you're probably going to have to use the F interaction system to be able to actually do it after you get off of the bike. The texts that they released mentioned the fact that you're going to have fuels and batteries, so which is it? Now, there is a power plant that's going to use fuel to actually move the vehicle, so you're basically looking at gasoline. But the second power plant is actually mentioned because of the fact that the Racer has a second power plant that is going to add power. Now, they go on to say that as with any vehicle, this can be used in short bursts for power with low energy. But I'm not sure that's a known gameplay mechanic. Like if you go stealth in one of your ships, are you using some battery to be able to move along with lower, signal? This came off like they were just like saying this is known information. So I'm either missing something completely obvious, or this is something that they're hinting at as a design mechanic that they haven't actually fleshed out yet. So if I missed something, which is entirely possible, please put it in the comments, because this is news to me. Somebody asked, can the cargo rack be moved to other variants? I think this is a pretty obvious answer, but no. It's one of the things that adds value to that particular variant, so I'm not expecting to see that on any of the other variants. What are the speeds for these variants of this vehicle? They didn't go on to break it down based on the individual vehicle. They go on to say that it's meant to be faster than the Cyclone, which is 45 meters per second, but slower than the Gravlev bikes, which started at about 60 meters per second. So you're really looking at 15 meters per second of gap there that you can fill. So you're probably looking at maybe 50 meters per second for the non-racer version and probably 55 for the racer. But then you also get the ability to, boost a little bit more frequently with the racer. It's hard to really say. They did say, though, that the ground bikes are going to accelerate better than the other ground vehicles, so Cyclone, Ursa, whatever, as long as they're on the right surface. So the two-wheel is going to be able to go faster. A lot of times in games that's done via wheelie, so that may be kind of tying into what we talked about earlier, but we're going to have to see. Now, one of the more interesting questions here was, are the weapons going to be gimbaled? How am I supposed to hit a target with this ship? And that was one of the questions I asked about when I did the Should You Buy video, because it's essentially, you're going to have to line up a shot, but you're also going to have to worry about the terrain that's in front of you, which is where you kind of differs on a Dragonfly. A Dragonfly, you don't have to worry about if there's a rock in front of you, but if you're on the ground, you obviously do. So it becomes a lot more mechanically complicated from a control perspective. And they went on to say that this is going to be a bespoke limited gimbal. So it's dedicated to this ship, so you can still slap weapons on this ship, size 1s, but they are going to be gimbaled, although limited. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, one of the other separate questions that they asked was the original design had one weapon, but this is confirmed to have two size ones. So whatever you've actually read, this will have two size ones, and they are going to be gimbaled, which is going to be unique to this ship. They asked, how does this thing steer with no forks? How can you sharply turn it? I'm not a motorcycle guy, so this doesn't mean anything to me. But the answer they gave was it's going to have plus or minus 15 degrees of steering angle with the forks, and it's going to be revisited as the design comes along. So it's going to be able to steer. You guys, if you know what this question means, you can answer it yourselves. And the last question was, does gravity level of surface have an impact on the traction that this bike has? And the answer was yes. Like all wheeled vehicles, this is meant to be impacted. So the design, the wheels though, being a Tumbril vehicle, is going to be a little bit different because it has the ability to kind of like flay out and have a little bit more traction. It's going to be able to spike in as needed. You got the additional boost factors there. It's basically the wheels on these Tumbril vehicles are a combination of traction, but they're also going to be suspension, which means that there's going to control through the gameplay a little bit better. So those were the questions that came out. If I read that and say, should you buy this vehicle? My initial thought is no, I think this thing is going to be less valuable than a hover bike. If you're just wanting to play along for the rule of cool, then yes, I think there's a lot of cool factor that's involved here, but would it ever be as useful as a hover bike? My answer would be no. If you still want to buy one of these and have it as an option to upgrade to another ship later, yes, this is going to be your best cross-chassis upgrade to basically the LTI token that you've seen in a very long time. So it's what I would recommend this ship for. Outside of that, I think this thing's a hard pass. So if you guys have questions, if you feel differently, if you want to know more, please get your answers in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for more coming your way soon, and have a wonderful night. Take care.